Right, okay, thank you very much for that introduction. I've discovered two things in my time in Hartlepool. One is that you always have crystal clear blue skies and the sun shines. And then, looking quizzical at that. And the second is the delight in listening to some really interesting presentations throughout the morning. It's been fascinating for me, and I hope that I can continue to contribute to your day. Sorry, I tend to walk around when I speak, so I shall lock myself to this podium. The perspective that I bring, which I think complements the things that Marie and Jan were saying, was that there's this issue about parental conflict and the way that parental conflict influences parenting and the consequences of those two things with the kids. And the focus so far has been primarily on how we address this triangle through addressing parental conflict. My work starts at a different point that says, let's focus on parenting through that conversation about parenting. That helps us expand and move into and consider parental conflict and how those two things then affect kids' outcomes and family outcomes. So that's kind of broadly where I'm coming from, and hopefully I'll be able to expand on that over the next. Now, I'm starting late.
You are, but if we could, yes, if we could 30 minutes.
Brief, that's, yeah.
30 minutes.
I'm a terrible timekeeper, so
shall I wave?
can you wave, unplug the mic? If you could give me a 10-minute warning, a 5-minute warning, and a 1-minute warning, that would be brilliant. Sorry to sort of do my housekeeping in the middle of presenting. The other issue for me, which I hope to shine a light on, is particularly the reason why I'm here in Hartlepool, which is about how we can use people power, the power of communities, to be able to transform the lives of kids and parents and families. And that's, again, something that I'll hopefully illuminate as I go through. Right, let's see if this... right. I think this is absolutely shocking that 1 in 8 of our kids in our country suffers from severe mental health problems. We are the 5th, 6th largest economy in the world, yet 1 in 8 of our kids has mental health difficulties that will not only undermine their learning, their development, their happiness today, but will affect their futures from their childhoods into their teenage years, from their teenage years into adulthood. Those kids are stepping onto an escalator that will lead to mental health problems as an adult, increased risk of criminality, less chance of getting a job, more chance of relationship breakdown, and so on and so forth. And I really truly do think that that is a shocking state of affairs for our country, given the wealth that exists within it. That figure goes from 1 in 8 to 3 in 8 when you look at families who live in greater social disadvantage. You'll know those areas only too well from your work in Hartlepool. I for many years worked in South London on some of the tougher estates down there, and I know those areas only too well too. You can multiply that 1 in 8 figure by 5. That's 5 in 8. 5 in 8, that's over half the kids who are exposed to significant family factors. Only half of those kids have the type of life journey laid out that I've just laid out when they are exposed to significant adverse family factors, parental conflict being a very big one, and parental mental health, substance misuse being the others. 5 in every 8, over half of those kids. And Jan and Marie have laid out very well some of the mechanisms, particularly from the perspective of parental conflict, as to why this happens. From my perspective as a person who's devoted their professional life to focusing on parenting, there's good news. There's good news in this. The good news is that parenting programs, there's very well-known kind of brands of parenting programs like P and IY and so on and so forth, that are shown to work. There's national and international evidence that shows in research trials that these things have good outcomes when they're applied. There's a problem though. These things might exist in a very good form within test tubes that are proven, but actually when it comes to the people that matter, the people whom we serve, the families who are exposed to greater social disadvantage and much higher risk, those families often don't get the help that they need. They often don't get it early enough to make the difference, and Jan and Marie were underlining the importance of interventions early in our lives. And the other factor is that the scale, the sheer scale, the numbers involved, it doesn't matter, from my point of view, it doesn't matter how much money our local authorities, our central government drive into this, there will never ever be enough money to meet the scale of need that exists. And those, I appreciate those are serious things. Some of those things that I've said are fairly contentious things, but and I'm very happy to take your thoughts on them later when I give up the mic. So that brings me to one of the things that myself and my colleagues have been working on for many years, which is do a lot of different types of work, both that stretches from pregnancy through to adolescence, universal interventions for everyone, particularly those who live in social disadvantaged communities, right through to really hardcore, highly specialist interventions for kids who've been excluded from school, kids who are subject to safeguarding and child protection procedures, kids who live in families where there's very severe parental mental health. So the sort of scope of work that we do is quite wide, but its focus is on parenting, and today I'll talk just about empowering parents, empowering communities. We started working on this about 15 years ago or so, and the reason why we did it was because we wanted to try and find a different way of trying to produce a way of helping parents help their kids have the best start in life, that tried to address the issues of improving access, improving the scale of help, so that there was more help available to those who needed it most. And the most important thing on this packed slide, not sure whether I'm using the pointer incorrectly, I think, because I'm not getting a spark. The most important thing for us about this whole journey was that we wanted to create really authentic, attractive, acceptable parenting support for families and communities who were at most risk of those outcomes, and we wanted to do that by recruiting, training, supervising and supporting local parents in combination with us as professionals to deliver that parenting support. And what's so special for me today is up there, in that corner over there, and over there, all around this room, are parents, local parents from Hartlepool who have been taking part in our EPEC programme that we've been working on over the last 9 to 12 months. And they are the embodiment of our approach to trying to do the things that I've just been describing. Along the way, I think there's several different components that make this work. One is EPEC consists of some manualised, rather like JAMS materials. There's a systematised way of doing things that's been co-produced by parents all the way along the line. Our parent group leaders are the lifeblood and soul of why this works. That's coupled with the importance of being able to engage and do outreach and be able to talk to parents who are suffering, but often parents who feel pretty alienated and distant from certainly the jobs that I do, and are suspicious of my motives and so on and so forth. So that the way in which we engage parents is absolutely crucial to opening the conversation about sensitive issues like parental conflict and how they're looking after their kids and so on and so forth. Along with that is the importance, and Jan underlined this as well, the importance of hard evidence. It's one thing having your heart and soul in something. I've learned the most in my life from doing research on things that I really, really believed in, only to be dismally disappointed when all the facts pointed in the other direction. And I had to swallow my pride. I was faced with two choices. Either I swallow my pride and get on with it, or I pretended I didn't do it in the first place. I found the latter is a less successful way of covering my tracks than swallowing my pride. The other thing about EPEC is, and I'll say a little bit more about this on the end, is it works not only because it's got science behind it and it's a phenomenal thing to do, but it works because it's about being part of a bigger, larger family and bringing networks and relationships and embodying community spirit and bringing that back to the fore, so it's not doing unto, it's being with. Over the years, we've developed some core programs. So there's the one that we're using here in Hartlepool, which is called Being a Parent. That's for parents, kids with aged between 2 and 11. And you can see that we've got kind of program for parents with teenagers, one for very young kids. And then down the bottom, there's a whole host of kind of variations. We've got a version of EPEC for parents whose kids have got ADHD, one for parents whose kids have got ASD, and so on and so forth. The crucial thing for us is that what we're interested in doing is focusing on geographical communities that have got certain characteristics, and then making EPEC available and very, very prominent within the community, and it's delivered through children's centres and so on and so forth. You won't be able to see this if you're sitting at the front, let alone sitting at the back. But this is the content, and I think the content here is really interesting, because from a parenting perspective, we start with saying, what's it like for you to be a parent? What are your strengths? What are your challenges? What's your history and what's your story about being a parent? What's your cultural story? What's your family story? And so on and so forth. So we want people to start with the journey of themselves as a parent. And then we move on to the notion of focusing on acknowledging and accepting feelings and how they're expressed. Then we move on to play, and particularly in this context, child-led play, and valuing children's needs. Then we move on to, for those of you who will be familiar with this sort of territory, we move on to more social learning theory stuff about avoiding labelling, using descriptive praise, and then there's some things to do with understanding and being more in tune with your child as a person, so reflective function and mind-mindedness, metalizing, and so on and so forth. 10 minutes, better crack on. Then we get into kind of boundary setting as being kind of ways of expressing oneself as an assertive parent, not as an aggressive, authoritarian parent, but neither is one a passive, laissez-faire parent. And then we get into kind of communication and broader stresses in life. That's one way of reading that curriculum. And the reason why I got involved in parental conflict is we have loads of parents who come to this parenting program because they're struggling with their kids, and they go, oh God, this makes a lot of sense to me in relation to being a parent, but it makes a hell of a lot of sense to me in relation to my relationship with my partner or my ex-partner or my separating partner, or so on and so forth. Because if you think about the slides that Jan and Marie put up about bringing life stuff with us, that's the sort of stuff that we're covering in those first sessions. How we communicate. You can see the thread of assertive, expressive, and respectful communication that's about not only being able to express oneself, but it's being able to try and understand and be in tune with the other. And there's something for us, both a balance between some of the behavioural and social learning aspects of relationships, but there's something about the relating aspects of relationships. So that underpinning relationship work is about this creation of a stimulating, secure and warm environment, whether that's a relationship that involves two adults or a relationship that involves two adults and their offspring. Right, in the interests of getting you to the destination, I shall sketch over this. There's nothing, but I always get told off by my colleagues when I say there's nothing new in the content of this. Unsurprisingly, this we don't do what I'm doing now, which is kind of talk extensively. This is about interaction. So the whole of the content of this is about starting where people are at and guiding them and enabling them to think about the journey that they're on. And in doing so, crucial is the action takes place at home. People practice, learn, reflect, and think about stuff in the sessions. The crucial thing is helping them do it at home so they can come back the next week and go, I tried this, we go, brilliant, I tried that, shame, whatever it is, but it's the action is at home. And I've made the pitch already. These groups are led by fantastic people like the parent group leaders that are in this room. These groups are fronted up by well-trained, supervised parents from local communities. They are the lifeblood of this because they can do something that I cannot do. I've spent a lot of my professional life turning up on people's doorsteps, standing on the balconies of the estates that I work in. I knock on the door, somebody opens the door and they go, who the hell are you? What do you know about my life? And how dare you think you can make comments about it? because you just come from a different class, often a different ethnic background, maybe a different religion. What the hell do you know? And that's, for me, why people power and the combination of how we as professionals make the most of the knowledge, the skills, the expertise that exists in every community, in every family, in every neighbourhood. How do we join that together to really motor, to make a difference? I'll skate over this, other than to say, please talk to the parent group leaders who are here today. If you join the workshop this afternoon, they can tell you much more about the training that you've been subjected to. 5 minutes, better crack on again. Right, we've trained loads and loads of parent group leaders over the years we've been working. The programme's been translated into lots and lots of different languages, both in this country and elsewhere in the world. Here's a slide. This is reasonable quality evidence. This is based on the feedback from over 70 of the courses I've been describing, nearly 800 parents. Just look at the line, the bottom line. Will everybody get the slides afterwards?
Yes, we did.
Fantastic. So you can read them at your leisure as you try and get to sleep. Bottom line, 800 parents. We said, how motivating were the people who led your group? How motivating. Motivation, the ability to give people a desire and hope to change. And I kind of go, that's a pretty good number. If I could achieve that amongst all of the families I've worked with over the years, I'd be pretty pleased. Not surprisingly, parents say delightful things about parent group leaders. Absolutely. I'll let you read these at your leisure. We've got a different idea in EPEC. The different idea is we want to build as big a as big a door as possible so that every parent will be able to see it, look at it, and find it an incredibly attractive thing to walk through. And when they walk through it, on the other side, they then know they've made the right decision to be there because they feel wanted, they feel at home, and they feel that it is the place for them to be. And that's a crucial element, and I think it's a kind of striking contrast to often how people in my position are often perceived. And again, I'll underline, it's the things that make the difference. So we've done this a lot. What is staggeringly wonderful is you're now doing it in Hartlepool. So I hope I've told you some things that I think are attractive points about the way in which one can mobilise partnerships between local communities and professionals to make a difference. The question is, the question is whether it does make a difference. So on the last 1 minute,
yes.
Well, the last 1 minute, does it make a difference? Yes, it does. Here's some stats. This is taken from our randomised control trial. 10% of the people who took part in our randomised control trial owned their own home. That means 90% of them lived in rented accommodation or different. 40% were lone parents. Two-thirds of the parents came from the population, part of the population with the lowest 20% by income. So 2/3 of the people came from the fifth of the population with the lowest income. 75% of them were unwaged. So you can read the stats and make your own mind up about whether we're reaching people who live in socially disadvantaged communities. If you're interested, you can You can help your sleeping problems if you have them by reading our research studies. They're all published, there's loads of them. I will flip over these in the interests of shutting me up.
Final moment.
Final moment. The final moment is, how do we do better? I think there's this intricate relationship between parenting and parental conflict. The work that Jan's described is clearly a vector for that, and interestingly enough, the more we do this, EPEC is also a vehicle. Mums mainly come, so we've got to think about fathers, other partners, and so on and so forth. And they don't always not come for bad reasons. They sometimes not come for good reasons. We've got to think about how we can use mums as a channel for changing mothering and fathering at home. And we've got to get better at engaging couples in those EPEC groups. We've got to increase the number of fathers who are parent group leaders. Good nod. And the other thing is, we also need, we're starting to test a greater emphasis on couple conflict, couples who are in parental conflict coming to these types of parenting groups. Finish.
Thank you very much.